My name's Jim Lee, and I graduated from Aurora College in 1972. I was actually in the class of 1971, but I was one of the last two people to graduate in the 5-year double major program with theology and history being my majors. I went to the Methodist Church where I attended, picked up a catalog, wanted to go to a Christian college in the Midwest, happened to discover Aurora. One of their representatives came to the high school, and I went to Aurora in 1967. Yes, I went to Aurora College, and I was planning to study law. My intent was to study law, being perhaps a history major, political science minor, and then go on with my education and perhaps go into international law. That was my plan. And then the Lord changed me. I went to the Advent Christian Church, met some wonderful friends, some of them being my future roommates, Ronnie and Rodney Lord, Frank Hall, and Gary Camp, Tom Gandy, many others that had an influence on my life, and became a Christian, attending the Aurora Advent Christian Church, and then sensed a call into the ministry in 1968. And so my plans to be a lawyer were dramatically changed. I kind of changed gears, kept my history major, but went into theology. And so I graduated in 1972 with a BH degree in theology and a BA in history. I just felt a tremendous, beautiful touch of the Lord through people, through the church, the pastors there. George Paul Hill baptized me in 1968, and he is currently still in the pastorate in Virginia. Dr. Baker and his wife invited me over to their home for supper one night and prayed over me, and it was that night that I really felt the call into the ministry. So all these personal touches, all these personal lives that came into my life relationally, just made a definite change from where I grew up to where I was at that time. I grew totally. I grew as an individual. I discovered what God had in store for me as a person. I developed, I think, a deeper awareness of people and their needs. I grew educationally. I grew even in my relationship to my family. My mother and father, I felt all of us were close, but we went off to school. When I went off to school, I came back. I had a different relationship with them. I felt closer to them. I appreciated them more. And also, I discovered, I think, a dynamic in I guess when you feel like you're growing up in one particular area, that you know that area, but then when you go to a place outside Chicago, Illinois, which I'd never been before in my life, I sensed a more urban awareness, a deeper need for in people's lives in regards to urban situations, and even growing up in a as far as a racial climate where I grew up, there was not many minorities, but when I went to Chicago and went to Aurora, it was a real great experience to meet some of my Afro-American friends who I still consider friends today, and just to have that climate of growing in a different environment than when I grew up in New England. So it was good. Dr. Moses Krause is my first thought. He was a man that taught me about who God was, about a personal relationship with Christ. He opened just the doors of learning in my mind about spiritual matters that I had never really considered in my life. And when I found myself in his classes, I was just eager to learn. He was the fairest professor I ever had. I could never complain about not knowing something on a test because it was something I should have known. He was the type of professor that would invite you to his home. He and his wife, Dorothy, were very gracious people. When we would have a test, he would make fudge before we took the test. And I remember one occasion, we were supposed to have a test one morning, and he didn't show up. And being a doctor, we had to wait a certain period of time, and so we waited that certain period of time. And we all became so concerned about him because we thought something had happened to him. And so we were running all over the campus. There was just maybe 7 or 8 of us in that class. And I remember in particular, we were all concerned about his well-being. We thought maybe he had had a heart attack. We thought maybe something had happened to him. Well, it turned out that he was up in the library, and he had completely forgotten about that class and about that test. We were so relieved to find him that he canceled the test, and he was overwhelmed and our concern for him. So that was a very pleasant memory, and I'll always remember that love of Dr. Krause for all, not just me, but for all of his students. And when I went to Aurora, I established, like I said earlier, many good friendships. Those friendships have lasted. I have not been back to one high school reunion. I do not know what any of my high school graduates' friends are doing, but all of the friendships, most of the friendships I have now, the deep friendships, were established at Aurora College. Many of my friends are in the ministry, are involved in Advent Christian Church and other churches throughout the country and throughout the world. My wife and I met at the Advent Christian Village in Florida, and she was a graduate of Aurora as well. And our establishment of friendships there and throughout the denomination is a result of my connection with Aurora College when I became a student there and eventually an Advent Christian at that school. I would love to see the university perhaps return to a training ground for young people who would go into Christian service, perhaps mission work or the ministry. In the good times and the bad times, Aurora was a special place because of the size of the school, the closeness of the people. When you walked down the sidewalks, you knew just about everybody, and you knew what was going on in their lives. It was a personal approach, and it was always a place that you felt, I think, wanted and accepted, and it was a great atmosphere in the good and in the bad.